I'm sure you all know him from his many years as news anchor at WXX Fox 23 and ABC's WTEN News Channel 10. He's a 4-time Emmy Award winner, and he's also won writing prizes for his work as a columnist for the Troy Record, the Saratogian, and Capital Region magazine. We'll focus tonight on a conversation on his latest novel, Chasing Rome. I'd mentioned they're for sale out in front from Bookhouse. We'll be having a signing right up on stage afterwards. You'll be able to line up on that far wall and come up, meet John, get your book signed. It's the third and final installment of his trilogy, and we'll be talking about that tonight. He's also the author of children's books, including God Needed a Puppy and Keller's Heart. He and his wife, Courtney, we're so glad she's here with us tonight. They take care of 5 dogs, including 3 dogs with special needs. They're very philanthropic and dedicate their time and resources to various shelters throughout the Capital Region and other charitable causes. I've known John for many years, and I can say with authority that he's one of the really good people in this business. Please give a warm welcome for John Gray.
Hello.
Should be on.
Testing. There we go.
Here we go. You know your way around a microphone.
A little bit, yes.
So you were on the 6 News right until 6:30. You raced over here. Was it like a scene out of broadcast news or something?
No, we were okay. I said to my wife, make sure you're there because I don't want to be late, and realized it was only about a 10-minute drive away, so we made it just fine.
When did you start in the broadcast business?
I got out of college in 1985. And to my shock, all the TV stations weren't waiting for me to walk out of campus and say, hey, we've been waiting for you. Please have a job. So I interned at Channel 6, and I met a man named Don Decker, who was a news director, an old news veteran in the area. And he said, look, he goes, you don't have to listen to me, but go into radio first. You can learn how to write news the correct way, how to use your voice. You'll make a million mistakes and nobody can see your face. And then when you get better, come back and try TV. And that's actually what I did. I worked at, in the Capital Region at WABY, which was the old, I don't know how old the crowd is here, but Bill Edwardson and David Allen were on there.
Of course.
And then I worked at WTRY and Pix 106 back when Mason and Sheehan were there. TRY was downstairs and Pix 106 was upstairs. And then I worked at WGNA, the country station. And then I eventually got my foot in the door in 1988 at Channel 13 and went full-time January 1st of 1989. So TV is what, 33 years?
Fantastic. I came at the times, yeah, give a hand for that. Still going. I came in 1984, but I was rejected by like 150 newspapers. You didn't face all that rejection? You kind of worked your way up? You must have had some challenges in the beginning to get to where you got?
I tell when I love talking to kids who want to do what I do, and I say, up until when I left 13 to go to Fox, where they had offered me, they came to me and said, do you want to come work here? I had never gotten a job and went through the first time. I always got told no. And my dad was with us back then, and I would always talk to my dad. He'd always say, be respectful, try to understand why it didn't work out this time. It might be a blessing. Don't give up. Leave them with a good impression of you, because if something else opens up, they'll be like, you know what, we should have hired that guy, or maybe he'll come back around, and that's how it's worked out. So it's been it's a long ladder. Sometimes, one step up, 2 steps back.
And you've always had your blue-collar roots. I know you've always, South Troy forever, right? But you were a paper boy to start, right? And you worked in a cemetery. Some of those jobs, you didn't just land at a news station. You worked your way up, right?
Yeah, I grew up on, for anybody who knows South Troy, Mann Avenue is a hill that goes up to St. Joseph Cemetery. And my older brother Ed had the paper out first, and Steve had it, my middle brother, then it came to me. I think different than them.
Is that nepotism?
Yeah, nepotism with a pair, yes. And I slung that bag over my shoulder. It was, about 60, 70 houses on the hill. It was a heavy bag, especially on those days where you have like Sunday papers with all the advertisements. But I would, my last house was the house at the top was the caretaker's house at the cemetery, and I would sit before I went in there and read the paper almost cover front to back, and with him watching me out his window as I'm reading his paper, and then I would bring it to him and he'd growl at me. But I really enjoyed the news even as a kid. and it was always on in our house. My father was kind of a news junkie, and once in a while there's a show called Crossfire on CNN back then.
Right. Somebody
from the right and left, and I'd say, who's winning tonight? And we'd always talk about the news.
So you write a lot. I mean, you must not sleep when you were writing that weekly column for The Record. You were doing, I guess it was a monthly Capital Region Living. Do you just sit down and one draft you're done, or do you pore over those columns? Are they easy every week to come up with something?
I finally stopped doing it around June. I said to my wife, I go, something's got to give, because there wasn't enough time to do everything when the book writing started to take hold, and I was doing more and more of that. Because I was having to stop and go, wait, I have to send The Record something, and I'd try to think of an idea for a column. When I got that job, a guy named Doug Delisle, does anyone remember the name Doug Delisle?
Yes.
He asked me to write a column, and I said, Doug, I can't come up with 52 ideas a year. He said, well, just try to come up with 4 and get through the first month, and I was doing that. And eventually you do end up coming up with it. You just need one little kernel of an idea. I met Andy Rooney once in Lake George, and briefly, and he kind of had the same thing. You just need one little thing to happen, and you can get an idea. He would do it for TV, and I'm doing it for a newspaper. But yeah, it was a challenge sometimes to come up with it. But the idea is just sit there at the computer or the typewriter until something comes to you.
I mean, you're a local celebrity, always in the Best of Times Union. You would be best, columnist, best broadcaster. Do you like being a celebrity about town? You must get stopped, and do people come up to you constantly?
I find people are sick of me. They're tired of it. They see me all the time, so it's worn off.
I'm not starstruck then, John. I'm sorry.
And half the time they look and they get the station wrong, or they think I do the weather. I get that a lot. They'll say to me, "What's the weather?" And I'll say, "Oh, it's going to be sunny tomorrow." And thanks, Bob. Or and I just wave and keep going. I never correct them. So
I don't think Kovacek was ever going to get off the air. They gave him about 4 months of goodbyes.
I've known Bob for like 30 years, and at first he was like, he wanted to leave, and they wouldn't let him leave. Then he was part-time, and then he didn't. He's like, I almost felt like he was saying, well, I'm going to stop wearing a tie. Then you have to take me off there. Nah, don't wear a tie. You can keep doing the weather. Eventually, they named the street after him. So I'm happy for him. He can relax now.
How have you stayed in it for the long haul? Because Christy Gustafson Barletti covers it like a hawk.
Yeah.
The young broadcast journalists in particular are like a revolving door. They stay a few months, maybe 6 months, and they're out of there. What's going on in your business?
It doesn't pay a lot, especially starting out, and I think you have to have it inside of you, like this burning desire to really want to do it, to really want to be a storyteller. See, for me, if I get to tell a neat story, I get more out of that than the paycheck that week, if that makes sense. I just did a story for TV, for any of you who watch Channel 10 I came across this woman who was making dolls for children who were different. They might have a leg amputated or a skin condition, and she was making specific dolls for those kids, and she was in Ohio, and I contacted her, and I said, I want to do a story on you. I want to find a local child you're going to make a doll for. Like those stories I get really excited for. I run home and tell Courtney, my wife, about it, and we talk about it. She's like, well, and I always come back and say, did you get it? Did you get it? And I'll say, yeah, I got some good stuff this time. So I still enjoy it as much as I did when I was 22 years old. I love storytelling. So for me, that's the payoff. I'm not saying that a lot of the people who are jumping out of the business don't love storytelling, but I think with some of us who are in the industry, we really do get the joy out of that. And I don't begrudge anybody who leaves the industry to take more money for something else, because eventually you have to pay your bills.
Let's talk about your following on Facebook, which is phenomenal. How do you make time and you connect on such a personal level with people, both in your stories and social media? What has Facebook meant to you as a journalist, as a writer?
It's funny, I was at Fox 23, it would have been like over 15 years ago, and I didn't have a Facebook page, and I knew, I saw everybody getting them, and I didn't want one. I just thought social media was like where you put up pictures of your cat, or something, or silly things, or here's my muffin I ate this morning. I'd see this stuff and be like, who cares about your muffin? But my boss came to me and he kept circling back saying, you have to have a page, you have to have a page. And I remember thinking, if I have to do this, I want to do it in a different way. And I looked at some people whose pages I liked and tried to model it after that. My wife Courtney's an administrator on the page, and that's helped me a lot because I try to answer anybody day or night who private messages me, and it's hard sometimes if I get busy. So Courtney will help me with that too in terms of talking to people, and she'll say, hey, this is Courtney, because she knows a lot of things I might have said, like, oh, where did you get this dog, or how did you train your dog this way or that way? That's a lot of dog questions, and she can answer them too and say, hey, this is Courtney, his wife, and we did this or we did that. It's just a matter of, I think, to have a successful page, you have to, I tell anybody who will listen who are young in the business, I'm like, you've got to do two things. You've got to do it every day and be engaged with people, and you have to give away a little bit of yourself. If you're just like this all the time, and it's just a straight, I'm going to post news stories or whatever, and I'm not going to engage with you, I'm not going to show you anything personal about me, or let you in my life in any way, shape, or form, I think the pages don't do as well. But when people feel like they can have a conversation with you, like right here, right now, and hopefully you guys get to ask questions later.
Oh yeah, we'll have time for
yes,
questions.
That's when you get that connection.
So let's talk about now moving from journalism and these 800-word sprints, which was a column, to 70,000 maybe or whatever. What made you think, or what compelled you to try your first novel after a long career, writing as a journalist?
Everybody who works in the news business plans to write a novel someday. I think everybody thinks if you work in this industry, and maybe people who don't work in this industry, you think, I should write a book someday. And I always thought that. And people would say to me, they'd read my column, oh, you should write a book. And I'd say, well, you should write a book. You think I got this time? You think it's easy to write a book? And I sort of pushed it off, and I think I was waiting for the right time where I felt I could do it, and then the right idea, which came to me in a dream for the first book. And as silly as this is going to sound, I sat down at the computer. We lived in Wineskill at the time, and my wife knows right where I'm talking. We had the kitchen, a wall, and the computer on the other side. And Keller, my dog, we lost over the summer, unfortunately, he'd always lay with me. And I sat down to start that first novel, and I went, wait a second, how many words are in a novel? Now, I'd read a ton of books, but I couldn't tell you if there were 40,000 or 200,000. I had no idea. So I Googled how many words are in a typical novel. This sounds ridiculous, right? And it said, and it was actually Google Help. I said, you should at least have about 50 or 60, but you don't want to go higher than 90 unless you're Stephen King and you can write, whatever you want. But I was like, okay, so I'd have to write like 60 or 70 or 80,000 words. And I said, well, maybe I'll shoot high. I'll go for like 75. And I thought, can I even do this? And I didn't know when I started. I said, I'm just going to, I'm going to stop worrying about what I don't know. Just start writing your story and see where we're at. And it wasn't until I was about 11 chapters in, I went back and I cut and pasted into a thing to count the word count, and I was like, wow, I've got like, a third of the book. And I thought, and I've got a lot more stuff to say, so maybe I could do this. I didn't know, but I just tried.
So you didn't outline, you didn't plan this as a trilogy. Did you have the main character Chase first, or did you have Manchester, the setting? So the books are Manchester, Manhattan, and now Rome. Was this just as you went along, or you have this big picture in mind?
I only had Chase, and I had Manchester, and I knew she was going to have a dog, because every one of my stories has to have a dog somewhere in there. And I knew sort of where it was going, but I wasn't really sure. And that's kind of the fun of writing. I don't know how many of you come here for other authors, but for me, the joy, the thing that would scare you the most, thing that makes me excited the most, like I might start writing a book in January, I think I'm going to, that's separate of these books for my publisher, and I have an outline in my head of where it's going, but there's a lot I don't know. There's all these little side streets I might get led down, and that's kind of the fun part of the writing, when that magic happens. You go, you'd sit there after a good day of writing and say, I never thought I'd be going in that direction.
People who say, oh, that story will write itself. Not true, right? Not even the columns, not even the short ones.
And I always remember, Courtney and I went to the Rockwell Museum once in Stockbridge. And of all the stuff, we didn't want to take a tour, but we kept following a tour. We were eavesdropping on somebody else's tour. Every time the people would say something interesting, we'd listen in. And there was one where the one thing she pointed out that he had a very ritualized day of what he would get up, what he would do, and even if Norman Rockwell didn't have something to paint that day, he would get in front of the easel and put the time in, and I always remembered that. I thought, it's a matter of putting the time in and just sitting there and doing it. You know, somebody famously said it's, you know, staring at a blank page until tiny beads of blood form on your forehead, you know. But
Exactly.
it's not that dramatic, but you do have to just commit yourself to doing it.
You credit your wife, Courtney, for being really encouraging and helping you. Did you ever quit or set it aside, or did you just power through that first draft? And
Nope, she'd ask me once in a while. She was perfect with it because she wouldn't drive me crazy every day going, what'd you write today or how'd it go today? But every couple of weeks, how's it going? How's it going? And just, I mean, having a partner who's willing to take up some of the slack around the house when you're sitting in there for 2.5 hours sometimes helps a lot. You can't keep stopping to let a dog out. You can't keep stopping to make a sandwich sometimes. So having somebody who helps you helps a lot. None of these books would happen without her helping me and supporting me.
so now, you know, you've finished your third book. I've seen book signings where the lines have gone out around the store, hundreds of people. I know last year at Book House they sold out. I hope you get your copies. They won't be around too long as a perfect holiday gift. But is that more satisfying than having viewers who just saw your broadcast talk to you, or is it a different kind of satisfaction? It's a good news story?
It is, because it's more of me in those pages. You know, the news can be depressing sometimes, as you know from watching the news. So it's fun to have people really like a story or connect with a character or catch some little thing I put in there. I drop, what do they call them, ornaments or whatever, Easter eggs?
Easter eggs.
Yeah, I drop a lot of those in these books, and for people who are from the capital region especially, that they'll pick up on, and I like that, you know.
So I'm actually a little disappointed, but I have to ask this question. So you wrote this whole book set in Italy. It goes to Rome, to Venice. You didn't go to Italy. One, why not? And how did you do without going there? And shame on you for not bringing your wife to Italy to research this book, John.
Before you throw me off the stage, we were planning on it, and COVID happened.
We got a promise now?
Absolutely, we're going to go.
Okay.
In fact, I told her, I said, well, if any money comes from this book, we should set aside some and go to Italy. Yeah, I had a long conversation with the publisher. I said, the plan was we were going to go, and I wasn't going to sit there taking notes at everything every time somebody did something or said something, but I was going to, you know, especially at night, if she went to sleep before me, get my phone out and pull up my little, you know, note thing and put in interesting things I might want to put in the book. COVID happened, and I talked to the publisher and said, look, you know, we had already committed to Rome in the previous book at the end, and that's where so I don't know what to do. I said, should we just wait? And they said, we don't really want to wait. And so I ended up putting an SOS out on Facebook for people who had a connection to Italy. And I wanted people, not somebody who went there for once on a vacation, I wanted people who live there now, people from the capital region who transplanted there or lived there and are living here now. So I interviewed several people, and some of them for a while over Facebook or on the phone, you know, for an hour on the phone, taking notes about things so I could put things in there. And then I also, as goofy as it sounds, because this was during the pandemic, I watched hours and hours of travel videos of 10 things you didn't know about this and 5 things you didn't know about that. And I was absorbing all this, and it was funny because things that people mentioned to me started popping up in these videos. And I'm like, okay, 3 videos have mentioned how many cats there are in Rome running around. I better mention the cats, you know, things like that. It probably would have been even more detailed if I could have went there and gone, but we had to make a decision of holding the book off for it. Probably I'd be writing it now, and it probably wouldn't come out till next year if we had waited. So that was the commitment.
So it's really a love story between Chase and Gavin. She's a writer from Seattle. She goes to Manchester to sort of place she's always wanted to visit, but she's also happens into a story. Some interesting things happen. But it's a very chaste love story. I would rate it PG. There's no hot and steamy sex scenes and things. Why did you not go for that? Because you think of a romance, that's kind of what sells, but this book is popular.
Yeah, 2 reasons. One, I just don't. I think you have to write what you know or what you're comfortable with, and I'm not terribly comfortable with that. I've read some excerpts. I've never read the book 50 Shades of Grey, but I've read some of the lifted quotes from it, and I go, oh, good God. So I'm like, you know, and also I've got a more of a Christian publisher with Paraclete, so they were very, in fact, in the second book I had Gavin staying over at Chase's house, and they flagged it right away and said, And I remember to the court, yes, I'm losing my mind with these people. I go, he can't sleep on the couch. I mean, for God's sakes, it's 2021 when I'm writing this book. And they say, and she said, just calm down, figure it out. So it is very chaste, and there's not a lot of that stuff in there. But I have had some people who like that, so it's not so over the top.
You are a very spiritual, religious person. That comes through in the book. Why was that important to put into this novel?
It's interesting. It's a little bit there in the first one. It's sort of there in the second one. And I thought, I don't know if there's going to be a fourth book. This is the third of the series, so I'm going to put more of my faith in there, not my faith so much, but just faith in general. And that's why there's a character in the book who's a priest and his brother's a monk, and they play a role in the whole, how this whole story unfolds. So I just think it's important to me to give people something to grab onto a little bit. The one message in all of the books is don't give up hope and try to help other people. And that's what Chase has always done, whether she's in Manchester or living in a mansion outside of Manhattan or whether she's in Rome. Chase gets these messages one way or another from somebody. We leave that to the reader to decide, and she uses the information to help other people. And I even had Gavin, her fiance, who I won't give away what happens in the book, but him helping others as well.
So let's talk about your involvement with the film rights and a film producer. It was going along, and then people want to change the story into something completely different. Can you sort of summarize the situation?
The backstory is, before I had a publisher, I was trying to get people to look at Manchester Christmas. And a woman on the Facebook page, named Louise Dessert, her son is a composer who does music for Hallmark movies. She said, my son is involved this way. Let me reach out to him. And he gave me the name of a guy named Brian Herzlinger, who produces and directs a lot of Lifetime movies. And he agreed to look at it, and I emailed him my whole manuscript before I had the publishing deal. And after I got the publishing deal, Courtney and I, does anybody here go to Cape Cod at all? Any Cape Cod people? Orleans, anyone know Orleans? There's the Christmas tree shop in Orleans, right in the middle of town, next to Cook's. We were in that parking lot when Brian Herzlinger called me from California to say, I love the book, and I want to buy the rights to it. I want to buy the rights for $1, but then if we make it, you'll get more money later. And he bought the rights 4 years ago. And things churned along, and then eventually he was going to make it. Explained this to Paul behind the scenes, and he had financing lined up, and he had his actors picked, and then he started flirting with a bigger production company in Hollywood who does a lot of bigger Christmas movies, and he talked to them about his project with me, and they wanted to see it. And then they said, why don't we buy the rights from you and you can do it for us? So for him, it was an avenue to work with a bigger group of people who could help his career. I think he's regretting it a little bit now, because people say, what happened to the movie? He did this last year at this time. It took forever to get his contract done with them. And then towards the spring, he had to write a synopsis of my book of what his movie was going to look like. It was 30-some pages. He sent it to me. I couldn't believe how much of the book he kept in. He only changed a couple things, which is strange, never happens. And the new people looked at it, and for whatever reason, they said they loved the book. They were like, there's a dog in his book. We don't like dogs on the set. They're a pain in the butt. No dog. There's not enough of a romance tug of war, so let's add a character who she's also flirting with while she's in. These are things that were not in my book. So he sort of went back and forth with them, and that's been going on since last summer. So I checked with him recently. He said he's waiting for notes from them. I checked with them. They say we're waiting for notes from him. So they've got to get on the same page soon. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that they get on the same page after the new year. He writes the script. He shoots the movie. They shoot everything in Canada, this company, because they get big tax breaks. And hopefully Christmas of 2023, we'll see Manchester Christmas.
You got to keep the dog in it. We're dog people.
I understand. I agree.
We love that dog in there. We're going to open it to questions. I don't know, Jen, do you have a mic, or do you want me to bring one around? Okay. A couple questions. One, your biggest fan, she emailed me, and she couldn't be here tonight. She had a couple questions. And people know your personal life in detail, I guess, because of your Facebook. Right. They wanted to know about the first date with Courtney at Verdial's. Am I saying it? In the restaurant that makes it?
Wasn't Verdial's. We've gone to Verdial's, but it was Laney's, actually. Laney's Cafe.
Then, did you meet her in the checkout line at Price Chopper?
Yes.
Tell us the story.
Yes.
I don't know, people know all your details.
Yes.
Okay, tell us that story.
Courtney and I met a long time ago when she was, she's still younger than me, but she was even younger then. And she was going to study, I was at Channel 13 at the time. She was going to go to school, was going to school for broadcasting. And whenever I would come in, she'd make a point of saying hi to me and telling me, I'm going to do what you do someday, I'm going to be in TV. And so when someone says that, you remember them. Like most checkout people, you say hello and, that's it. If they said later, did you remember the guy from aisle 7? You'd say, what guy? But I really did remember Courtney. And I don't know how many, she could tell me, how many years went by? Was it 10? Something like that. I went to, somebody was leaving, there was some kind of going away thing at one of the pubs on Western Avenue. I forget the name of it, and I went there really quick to just say goodbye to somebody, and she was in the pub that night, and she kind of said, hey, do you remember me? I was the one in the checkout aisle, and I said, I do remember that conversation. She said, I work at Capital News 9, YNN, I'm actually doing it. So that's how we ended up reconnecting that way,
That's a great story. Did you get a column out of it? Ever?
I don't know if I ever wrote about that. Probably.
Who's got a question for John? He's very. I really like your humility,
raise your hand,
John.
and I'll bring a microphone.
Yeah, if you raise your hand.
It could be a dog question too if you want. It's okay. If
Yeah.
anybody follows the page.
Hold on.
We've got a question down here. Here we go.
Oh, well. Hi, John. It's not a question.
Sure.
It's happy anniversary.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we just had our anniversary.
They do know all about your lives, John.
They do.
Congratulations. Got committed fans here.
Have your hand up, right?
Hi, I don't have a question. I just wanted to let you know that I retired from the Troy School District 20 years ago. And when I was teaching, I taught 5th grade, and I don't know how many Thursday mornings I would bring your column into the class, and we would read it and talk about it, and it was always a great connection with the children. And I wanted to thank you for that. That was something that you helped me imprint on them.
Oh, thank you. I tried to make those columns a little life lesson-y, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny true story. I'm Catholic. I grew up Catholic. I was an altar boy. I was a lector at church. I was a Eucharistic minister. The church was important in my life. It still is. And I sometimes try to sneak little moral lessons in the things I write. And I once had a priest who I didn't know stop me and say, I read your column. And I said, oh, great. He says, I see what you're doing. I see you. And I go, and I said, okay, what are you seeing? He says, your Catholic upbringing is woven in there. But he goes, but you hide it well, but it's there, And I remember what I said to him. I said, well, did you ever try to give medicine to a dog? I go, yeah, you got to hide it in the pudding and then say, here, take this medicine. I said, so if I come over the top too much, people will be like, oh, holy roller guy. I'm not going to read this thing, but, you sneak it in there.
And I also wanted to tell you that I met you a couple of years ago at Barnes & Noble when the first book came out, and you and Shana signed the book.
Yes.
And, I had to give it to my granddaughter who had just lost her puppy, and it helped her get through.
Oh, good.
So that was wonderful, and I follow you religiously on Facebook.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. We try to post and make it a very happy page. There's so much negative stuff on social media. We try to make it kind of fun.
I'll start with you, and then I'll continue.
So I've been following you since I was younger, and my question is, with everything that happens around in the capital region, it's usually not real positive or uplifting. You always have that lighter side, even the books. How do you keep that positivity amongst the negativity that's all around us?
I'll be completely honest with you. I just feel grateful every day. I'm grateful. I was raised that way by my grandparents and my parents, to be very thankful for the things we have. And I just, I feel many days like this is no exaggeration to you. I was thinking about this the other day. I grew up in South Troy on the hill. We had no air conditioning, so it was brutally hot in the summer. And I had this little room under the stairs. I was like the thing under the stairs, my brother would call me. But I'd open the window at night to get any breeze that would come in, and I could always hear the trains coming through Amtrak and the other train tracks. And once in a while at Channel 10 at night, if they have the garage door open, I can hear the trains and I'm on the set. And I thought if I could ever go back and tell that kid who was 12 years old, someday you'll be working on TV and, you'll have this wonderful wife and this wonderful life and these, I've got children from my other marriage and they're wonderful kids, I'm just so lucky, and I don't try to ever take that for granted, and I try to put that out there, and try to be positive, because that's like when I was forced to have a Facebook page, did not want it, and I'm like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm not going to do it like all the other stuff. I want to make it a positive page, and the dogs have just taken it over now. I'm not stupid. I see what you guys respond to. I'm like, you know what? And that's why I ended up creating a separate page. It's just some news stuff, because if I, in the last 5 years, if I mentioned the word Cuomo or Trump, it just went, Courtney, go, what are you doing? I could just write anything. I could write, the name Cuomo ends with a vowel, and it'd be like, oh yeah, well this, and you go, so I just keep that page strictly about writing and puppies and, and happier stuff. Like this morning, I went out of my element and I posted about Robin Meade, because we've watched her for years on Headline News, and I was just so surprised they pushed her out over there. You want to go over and go, everybody who works here, that's the one you're going to push out the door? What are you doing? But, just trying to be positive.
Good evening.
Hi.
2 questions. What was your inspiration for your first book? And what is your writing style? I know some authors, they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, write for 2 or 3 hours. Some people lock themselves in a room for 2 or 3 days. So what is your writing style?
The idea for the first novel came from a dream. When I've told this before, but I'll tell if you hadn't heard it. I dreamt one day I was in an old church. It wasn't a church I knew, and there were stained glass windows, and there was a man with his back to me. This is like one of the quickest dreams I ever had, but it stuck with me. And he was staring at the stained glass window, and I was looking at his back, and I saw he was staring at what? I don't know. It was a window. And he turned to me and said, "Did you see that?" And I said, "See what?" He said, "It just changed." And I looked back at the window and said, "I think it's the same, sir." He said, "No. There's something there that wasn't there before." And then I woke up. I was like, what the heck was that? It just stuck with me. And it was like a sliver or something, or you have something stuck in a tooth. You can't you're like, what are you doing? I got to get this thing out of my tooth. It's driving me insane. That's what that little 20-second dream was. And when I sat to write the story, that was the kernel of the idea of, what if this person went to a town she'd never been to, somehow rented out an old church that had been renovated, and she started seeing things in the old stained glass windows, but they were clues to help people in town. And then I was off to the races with the story. My writing process is, I generally don't write late at night. If I write when I'm tired, it's awful. It just comes out awful. So I like to write in the morning, between 9 and 1 o'clock, if that makes sense, in that range where I'm awake, but I'm not tired at all. And I just, and I try to limit it to 2 or 3 hours at a time, and not keep writing for 12 hours at a time. And if I get stuck on anything, I go for a walk, and I might listen to music real low, but this is going to sound silly, I can't listen to music with lyrics if I'm trying to think. It has to be music. My wife knows I listen to James Horner all the time. He's a composer, did Braveheart, Titanic, The Perfect Storm. He's done all these. If you ever want music on the house, just say to Alexa, play James Horner music, and it'll play an hour of nothing but themes. You'll recognize most of them from movies you've seen over the years, and I'll do that. I also find when I write, I can't watch anything new on TV. I can watch reruns of stuff I've seen, because my brain just sort of goes, I know all this. I can't bring new stuff in, or it starts messing with the world I'm trying to stay in when I write. Once I try to write about something, I have to stay there, if that makes sense. And I can't dump a bunch of other new things in there, because they just start competing with my brain of what I want to talk about, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I'll come back to you. You had flagged me down earlier.
Hi,
I am also a big fan of the dogs.
Good for you.
I enjoyed the Election Day story about the dog poop. That was hilarious. My question is, Gavin absolutely intrigues me. He never questions Chase's visions or the things that she sees. Where does that come from? I mean, he never questions her.
I think it's just, he looks in her eyes and just believes her. That to me is, from the day he met her, and one of the joys of writing is when you write a scene in a book and you're smiling. I want to say it was Robert Frost, maybe, who's Mitchner. One of the great writers said, no tears for the writer, no tears for the reader, no laugh, and there's been times where I'm writing something that's might make you feel emotionally, and I like if you walked in on me, you go, what in God's name is he? I'm like, I have tears in my eyes, or I'm really smiling because I really like what I'm writing, and I loved the opening pages of Manchester Christmas, because that's where they meet, and she's got a spark in her, and she's not intimidated by him. He's this big, strapping guy, and he's used to women just going, oh my God, he looked my way, and she's like, whatever, dude, and I like that about her. But once he let his guard down with her and just started being himself with her, I think he just believes in her so much that, he believes her, and there's probably things in there you say I always try to write in a way where you won't look at it and go, I would never do that in that situation. I try to avoid that, because that's one thing pulls me out of books, or especially movies, all the time and Courtney is sick of me yelling at the TV set when people do stuff. You've all done it, you know what I mean? You'll throw things at the TV, like, well, what's the matter with you? You go, no one in their right mind would ever do what he just did, and then you stop. You're disengaged from the story when people start doing goofy things. So I try to write that way. But he's in love with her, so he believes her.
Hi, John.
Hi.
I'm Wendy, by the way. I messaged you earlier about parking.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Anyway, but I just wanted to say that I think you and Courtney, God bless both of you, you're the most caring, you're the most caring people. You have hearts of gold, and I love what you do with your animals and how you let everybody know. I thank you for that.
People give us a lot of credit for these. The animals are not that hard. They're really not. I mean, they're sweet, they're fun. They're challenging sometimes, especially Eli. I'm not going to lie to you. The 5 of them, Eli, if you were getting toys and you had 5 toys and one of them came out with parts missing, and you're like, oh, what are we doing with this thing? That's Eli. But but we love them to death, and they all somehow fit together. It's amazing. It really is amazing.
Hi, John. I'm Mary Ann, another one of your people that read Facebook. I've always wanted to write a book, and that just seems to be something I say all the time, but I like what that other person asked about your writing style. But do writers write from beginning to end? Like, do you have parts of the story that are already in your mind for the end? I just don't know how to start, and if I don't have an idea, what am I writing about? I have a hard time with thinking of ideas that are going to interest people.
What I would suggest, I never just write blindly, like I have no idea who these people are or where the story is going. I try to, and this is where I'm taking a walk or something where it's just you, and you're really, or whatever it is you do where your mind can just kind of wander, and ask yourself, you be the reader as well as the writer, and do the premise. I've done this exercise with children when I read children's books at schools. I've gone into like over 100 schools in the area, and we'll do an exercise on writing, and I'll say, what if I'm talking to you now and we heard this big bang outside, what could the bang be? And I'll say to the kids, think of something ridiculous, something crazy, and somebody will say a dinosaur. I'll say, let's say it's a dinosaur. I go, and maybe he was walking down the street and a car swerved and crashed. Everybody's okay, but that's the bang you heard. I go, and what would happen? Maybe he gets his head entangled in the power lines so the lights go out. Now the police are coming. I go, and then the story might turn because he's a really sweet dinosaur and everybody's afraid of him, but they don't know him. And that's the fun of writing. You try to get a general idea of where to begin, And a lot of it's like building a house. I just had this conversation with my publisher about the next book. They said, how would you feel if we helped work with you on the book as you go? And I said, you can give me all the ideas you want before I start. But I can't be like stopping and going and sending you 3 chapters and saying, well, let's make Sarah Sam and let's have him be a plumber, not a police officer. That book would take forever to write. But I said to them, it's almost when you build a house, you say, you don't just like start hammering stuff. You say, well, before we build your house, how many bedrooms do you want? And you go, 3. Do you need 2 baths or 1.5? 1.5's fine. Do you need a really fancy bathroom? You're like, well, I'd always like a soaking tub. Okay, you can have a soaking tub. What about the kitchen? Oh, I don't care about the kitchen. I order out all the time. And then you start building that house to what you have an idea. So I would suggest to you, I love yellow legal pads. I know that's very old school. I've got them. Once I start writing a book, I'll have all kinds of things in there that I'll write down that I want to include. And I'll start, know where I want to start, know who a general idea of who my protagonist is, my main character, and maybe a couple other people, and then see where the story goes. You'll be surprised where the story goes as you write, what comes to you. But always ask yourself, what would be the cool thing to happen next? And if you think it's interesting and cool, odds are your readers will think that too. Sure.
Hi, I was wondering if you could tell us more about your character development and if your characters are based off of any people you know in real life or based off of maybe something from the news or stories like that.
Definitely I pull from a lot of things, and I swear it's almost like you walk through life with this empty backpack and you'll see something interesting and you don't know why, but you pick it up and put it in the pack, not knowing how you're going to use it later. There was an old, any Star Trek fans here? I'm going to date myself. There was a Star Trek where Kirk was on some planet and this lizard thing was going to, kill him, and there you go. And Kirk, Captain Kirk doesn't know why, but he starts collecting stuff along the way. Like something is brain saying, you know what? I don't know what I'm going to use that for, but I'm going to take that. I might need this later. I might need it. Same thing with you saw a more contemporary thing, Tom Hanks in Castaway. He ends up getting videotapes. Well, he's on the island. Everybody here has seen Castaway, right? He's on the island with no electricity and no VCR, no TV. So videotapes don't help. I'm not going to throw them away, though. I'm going to put them aside. I might need those later. Then when he's building the raft, he's taking some of the stuff and wrapping and all that stuff. So it's hard. Character development, yeah, I like to put them to a challenge where they have to overcome something. That's always the trick of every writer. Give them, Aaron Sorkin, I watched his master class, and he's very big about this. There's always an obstacle. Here's Sarah, here's what she wants. We got to put some stuff in the way to mess it up. We're watching right now a show called White Lotus on HBO, which is just a crazy show. But that show is nothing but conflict and obstacles, and nobody can walk from here to the lobby without there being a problem. You know what I mean, in that show. But I like my characters to, in Chase's case, she's always helping people and trying to solve a mystery. It always seems that way with those books with her. But I'd like to see it change. The new novel I want to write in the spring or in January, if I start it, is going to be about, and you'll like this, it's a Boston Globe reporter who, her big thing is gotcha journalism. She exposes people. She loves that moment where she almost humiliates them in the newspaper, catching the guy who's stealing the money from City Hall, catching the car dealership that's doing whatever. That's her whole shtick. And then she ends up investigating a series of miracles that happen in and around Boston. And they can't be real because miracles aren't real. And she ends up meeting this fellow who, seems to be the one causing these miracles, and she has to discredit him, but she ends up getting surprised, but the fact that the miracles really are happening, and then she has to confront her own face. But there'll be a change in that character throughout the book where how you see her at the beginning. In fact, I was reading the outline, or Courtney was reading the outline. We were driving back from somewhere, I forget where we were, where were we? It was a trip. We were on a trip, and maybe New York City. We're driving, and she's reading it before I sent it to the publisher, and she said, her name's Brooklyn. I might change her name. Her name's Brooklyn, the main character, the woman. She's a woman. And Courtney goes, she's kind of a jerk, like about 30% in. And I said, well, she is, but she's not going to be by the end of the book. You know what I mean? Any Game of Thrones fans here? They did a wonderful job in that show of taking characters, and are you a Game of Thrones fan? No, but they would take a character and say, this is Paul, and he's a monster. And this is Sally, and she's all good. And 20 episodes later, Paul's got a lot of redeeming qualities about him for a monster. And, the other one I thought was all good. She's kind of conniving, and that's kind of fun with a character to see them change a little bit and hopefully change for the better. I don't know if that really answered your question. Hopefully.
Thank you.
Any more questions? We got time for one or two more.
John, I have to admit, I'm not one of your Facebook followers.
That's okay.
And I watch Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Sorry.
My wife fills me in.
Gotcha.
But we did message, and you did respond, which I really appreciate that. And we were the ones that went over to read the last 2 chapters of Manchester Christmas in Manchester.
Oh, I remember that.
Yes, right. And we sent you the selfie from the Panthers place.
Yes.
So that was pretty cool. So my question is, we're heading to Manhattan on Friday, and are there any spots like the cafe or the church or whatnot that are actually real that we can go
in the
send
book.
you a selfie from? So that's it.
Let me think. Well, what's funny is, have you read the second book? The auction house exists, but that cafe I have in the second book is not there unless they built one since I wrote the book. But obviously all the Central Park stuff is accurate, and Fifth Avenue and all that good stuff, and St. Patrick's Cathedral, of course. I would recommend, was it John or Johnny's, the pizza place we went to? Courtney? John's? Johnny's. We went to the best pizza place. You can't buy slices though, it's only pies. It's not far from Times Square if you're looking for a place to eat. That and El Camino we like to, am I getting that right? Dos Caminos. I'm terrible with Spanish. I wish, but you know what, there is one thing, the Bow Bridge is as well, you've seen it in a million movies. That's kind of a fun place to go. In fact, I've always wanted to research. I never got around to it. We recently took a weather video of the bridge in Washington Park in Albany, and I thought, boy, that looks like a smaller version of the Bow. I wonder if it's the same.
There was a little overlap with the designers. Olmsted designed the Central Park in New York City, and he was part of the group that designed. So our Washington Park is very much a copy of Central Park. You're right.
I looked at that bridge and thought that's a knockoff or the same people.
It's a knockoff.
Some people had something to do with it because it looks very much just a little bit smaller. But yeah, that's a fun place to go as well. Yeah, and the Gucci bags they sell on West 47th, they're not real Gucci, just so you know.
Only one C, I think, G-U-C-I. They have to change something in those.
Yeah.
Were there any other questions?
I've got one last question. And the signing will be over along that wall, and there's still books out in the auditorium.
All right. Hi, John. I'm a fan of the Facebook page and the dogs. So my question is about the dogs.
Yeah.
And I was curious if you could give us a little description, a little bio of each of the 5 dogs, something you'd like us to know, good or bad, and are any of them best buddies?
Yes. Here's the description of the dog, and Courtney can correct me. Sebastian, the big German Shepherd, very independent. His whole breeding is, if there was, a Western where the guy rides into town and saves the day and then leaves, that's Sebastian. He's got this new weird thing. We haven't put this on Facebook yet. We have a bathroom downstairs off the kitchen, and we never really, the door doesn't close all the way. It does unless you click it, so it's never shut. When he wants to get away from the other dogs because they're driving him crazy, he goes in the bathroom and he pushes the door almost closed all the way. And we're like, where's Sebastian? And you look and you see one eye looking out of the bathroom.
Is he reading your books in there, John?
Yeah, probably. He also, his big thing is when he's Courtney's dog. German Shepherds belong to one person. They love the whole family, but they really belong to one person. They'll deny it, but it's true. And like, I'll go home tonight, I'll get home around 5 or 12, and I'll let them all out. They look for a snack. Last night I gave them peanut butter. Sebastian's like, I love you so much. What are we having tonight? What's the snack tonight? Well, we're peanut butter. Oh, I love peanut. He pushes his way to and I'm like, peanut butter, peanut butter, peanut butter. They all like peanut. I go, okay, we're done with the peanut butter, but I'm going to put the TV on and we can all hang out together. Sebastian leaves. He goes and gets in the bed the bed right next to Courtney's bed. In fact, she's put that bed sometimes away from her bed. He's dragged the bed next to the bed so he could sleep right next to her. It's really cute. Winston's he's the worry ward. He's like the empath. He feels everything. He's Mr. Feels. So when you come home, he can't contain himself. He still jumps. He's not supposed to jump. Stop jumping, stop jumping. You know, you could threaten him, you could scream, he jumps, and then sometimes he pees a little bit because he's too excited. So now you have pee on your pants, and you go, Winston. That's Winston. But he's the big watchdog. He watches the window. Right now, Sebastian's probably upstairs because he knows he'll listen for the car, then he'll come downstairs. Winston is on a couch in the front room watching the driveway for Courtney to come home. He won't leave that position. And in the yard, he watches the other dogs. That's 2. Eli is just, he was returned a bunch of times before we got him, and we kind of know why. Winston will come up and say to Paul, hey, I'm Winston, Eli. I'm Eli. Hi, Eli. Pet him, pet him, pet him. And then he'll look at Paul and say, are you looking at my bone? And he'd be like, no. And then he'll growl and grab his bone and run away. And you're like, that's Eli in a nutshell. And he does all the counter surfing and steals things. Who have we got left? Bella is our first little girl. She chills now, although I made a big mistake, Courtney knows, years ago. I let her try coffee, and I don't even know, I don't think it's bad for them. It's probably not good for them. But
is it decaf at least, John?
Yeah, Bella now is obsessed with coffee, so if you get a cup of coffee, she jumps up and stares at you to let you have a sip of coffee. But she's a sweet girl. And then there's Rosie, who's our new one, who is blind and deaf. Now, for those who don't know on the page, Eli and Bella are both deaf. They're double Merrills. The way they were bred, when you breed these Merrill dogs, they come out white with bright blue eyes. That's what they're going for, the breeders, but a quarter of the litter will come out with disabilities. And usually they put them down. They just get rid of them. Some of them get rescued, and that's where these dogs are from, rescues. So Bella and Eli, beautiful blue eyes, beautiful white fur, both deaf. Rosie is deaf and blind, but she's a Spitfire, and she's figured out the whole house now. We've got to get her going up the stairs, though. She just has an issue with stairs, and she's getting too big to carry up the stairs now at night, so she's going to have to figure this out soon. So that's my fault. We got to start putting treats on each step and get her to do it. But is everybody here on the page, or some of you probably not on the page? I deliberately put up a lot of videos of Rosie when we brought her home because she was a new house, didn't know the yard, but she mapped it all brilliantly. She started slow, and she would just memorize one little spot and then add to it and add to it. Now when you put her outside, she knows the whole yard, the whole house. If you watched her, especially outside, you would insist she wasn't blind because she's running when she can't see, but she knows where everything is. She knows the feel under her feet, and so she's got everything down. But she's coming along really, really well. And I'm amazed they all get along the way they do. We've been very lucky. I tell people, I think it's because we got them all as babies. We didn't bring in an adult dog, which would be trickier, because if you bring in an adult dog, God bless them, but you're bringing in years of whatever else they've learned. With puppies, you can kind of teach them as they go. But it's a lot of fun. It really is.
We love dog people. How many people are dog people out here? Yes, we are. Our famous political boss, Dan O'Connell's great line was, all dogs are nicer than most people.
True.
Probably true.
True.
So I will take the privilege of the floor. One final question.
Yes.
Since we got so many fans, they probably know. I get this from Christy Gustafson Barletti's very popular 20 Things You Don't Know What You Did. I was interested to read that you were a big Broadway fan, as I am.
Huge.
I am too. You've seen Rent 14 times? Is that still the count?
Yeah, it's about right, yeah.
And you can sing the entire soundtrack. Since we have family and friends, I know they're singing anchors. We thought little Seasons of Love, John.
I would not put you through that. I can't sing a lick, but I do know it. And just to Broadway, I just bought us tickets to was it Hairspray? I've never seen Courtney likes Hairspray. We're seeing that Sunday. So if you go to the Sunday matinee, look for us. We'll be there. And we have tickets for not Mrs. Doubtfire. What's the other one? Tootsie in the spring. And we just saw Almost Famous, and
I want to see that. Is that good? Cameron Crowe?
it's pretty good. There's some good songs. It's slow in spots. I'll be honest with you.
Not as good as the movie?
No,
I like the movie.
no, the movie's great.
Yeah.
The movie's great. But there's some good stuff in it. I can always. I've been going to Broadway since I was about 18 years old, and I don't know about you, but you just sit there and watch the talent of some of these people. It's just amazing. Sometimes you go in there and go, oh, we got the understudy for some part, and then they blow the doors off the building.
It's phenomenal.
It's amazing.
And we have the touring shows and proctors that are just a half a notch less than Broadway. They're fantastic.
Well, I tell people all the time, if you see a Broadway show and you look at the playbill, you'll see this person who's now on Broadway was in the touring company of Wicked and Rent and Les Mis, and so they work their way up.
I was going to hum a few bars and start with 525,600 minutes, but we won't. We
may go down. We may go down, and Courtney just found this. Anthony Rapp, who played
in Rent.
He was Mark.
Yes.
In Rent. Remember here see Rent ever? He's the one who wears the striped shirt and the scarf.
Yeah.
Mark, who's the filmmaker. He's doing a show at a place, a little theater off Broadway, where he talks about Rent, the experience of his life, and he sings songs from Rent. We might go down and see that. I think it opens in January at the New World Theater in New York City.
Fantastic. Well, what a wonderful night this has been. Am I right? Is he one of the good guys? John Gray.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.